So here we go. Backwards ideas. Number one. Yeah, thank you, everyone. See? Thank you, everyone. It's not yelling, it's passion. Okay, big ideas. Here it is. You ready? Number one. Whether you are in BC or not, every curriculum has goals. They may be called different things, but every curriculum has goals. Sometimes they're called process, sometimes they're called skills, sometimes they're called content, sometimes they're called competencies. It doesn't matter, but we need to know what they are and we need to know the structure. I'm going to show you BC's structure. Every curriculum has a structure, okay? And what that's going to help us to do is going to help us to choose the goals for the unit, because we need to know the goals if we want our students to know the goals so that they can look at evidence in this way, okay? It's really useful, as Leighton says, to organize our goals around a big idea or a big question, because it connects things together. It connects lessons together, activities together, days together, and it leads us, it guides us into the why. And we know through UDL that if we want to increase engagement and motivation, one of the first things we can do is show them why what we're learning matters, and that's what the big idea is going to help us to do. In order, though, for this to actually be like a support for student agency, the students need to know the goals. And so what is going to help that is if we actually translate these goals into goals that are student language is student friendly. Some of them are student friendly, a lot of them are not student friendly, right? And so really understanding like who is the group that we're looking to, that we're responding to, and how can we make those goals in language that they will understand. The biggest part here, and this is what another thing I wish I could go back in time to tell myself, is that it is not activities that we're evaluating. Activities are evidence. We evaluate the goals. The activities are possible pieces of evidence for the goals. This just blew my mind. You don't have to evaluate every single thing. You can use it as formative assessment. You can learn from each other. You can build on it. When we're actually evaluating, we are not evaluating the essay. We are not evaluating the diorama. We are using that as evidence to evaluate goals. And once we realize that, assessment will blow open for kids, because they will start to realize that it's not how you must show your learning in this way for it to count. Too, you can show your learning in any way for it to count. And that in itself decolonizes a lot of our practices, okay? You don't have to do it in the way that I like. We're going to do it in the way that works for you, and that can harness strengths and interests and passions, and that to me is everything. The other part of this is, and someone asked about assessment, we're really shifting in assessment to standards-based assessment, which is looking at not this average of failed attempts, but saying, what is our 3 best pieces of evidence? How do we triangulate with multiple formats and multiple perspectives, and really understand the depth of learning as opposed to just the quantity or the frequency of doing something multiple times. And so this is something that we're also pulling into the IEPs, which has historically for a very, very, very long time relied on frequency tallies as proof of evidence, whereas like no one else is learning that way. And so this idea of triangulation is something that is a really important equity-based practice, so that we could have room for kids to show their learning in so many ways. Okay, so I want to show you an example. Okay, so to do this though, I'm going to kind of show you some contrast. Okay, so I was fortunate enough to screenshot the previous curriculum, and you can't get it anymore. So I'm very excited to show you this, because I'm going to show you, remember I told you what I used to do. I go to the curriculum. So let's just pretend that I'm teaching Math 8, okay? I go to the shelf in the library, because this is before we have the bandwidth to like digitize anything. And I pull off the big binder from the shelf that says Math 8. It was a big red binder. I'll never forget it. And I put it on the table. It was like 500 pages. And so that first of all, I skip the front matter, because who has time? And then I look at the 2/3 left of the book, and I'm like, okay. And so they're all organized like by like learning goals and kind of what units go together. And in our previous curriculum, it was organized actually also to a backwards design framework. It was organized like this. There were goals connected to content. There was goals connected to process, okay? This is what it looked like. Ready? Here we go. Remember the PLOs? I know, coming back from the grave. Okay, PLOs. So this one, this is the one I had, but they were all organized this way, okay? So you have your processes and skills at the top, and then you have your content on the bottom. I just want you to look at this visually. It doesn't even matter that you can't read it. Look at it visually. look at the emphasis of content. It's like an 80% emphasis of content. You could just ignore the processes and skills and kids would be fine, okay? And that's often what happened because we didn't have time, because you know what, every year they would do an update and add another 80 pages and not take anything out. So we go through, right, Rebecca, we go through these curricular documents and then we get to June and there's 147 pages left, and so we just hope that, you know, the kids aren't going to need that information because it was presented to us in a linear sequential way instead of a conceptual way, which is where curriculum is moving to. Our renewed curriculum still has some questions. So look, this is the previous curricular model. Ready? Previous. Here's the new curricular model. Here we go. Now we have this also, oh, you're so right. This also explains why people are married to curriculum, because it's what they know. It's how, not curriculum, content. They're holding onto it and saying, take my content from my cold, dead hands, because they grew up with content. They were taught how to teach with content. I'm just like, what does analysis mean? How do I teach that? And because now look at this. This is the renewed curriculum. Now we don't have two goals. We have 4 different types. So we have big ideas, which is answering the question, what do we need to understand? Like, why is this important? We still have content, people. There is this big myth that we're throwing content out. No, no, no. We are not learning willy-nilly about anything. Like, content is what we're drawing on, right? This is what's going to help us kind of like build our skills. You know how hard it is to be critical about nothing? Try it. Big ideas. We have content. And our new processes are called curricular competencies. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. And then we have core competencies. Okay. So thinking about those as stems then, and I've shown this to kids, big ideas help us to understand. Content helps us to know things. Competencies, curricular competencies help us to tell us what we need to do. And our core competencies, Laura Tate taught me this word. She's like, competencies are who we become. We become joyful. We become critical. These are not things you master. These are things you commit to and get better at over your entire life, which is why we don't grade them. You cannot give someone a grade in joy. Makes no sense. Okay, I'm realizing I'm yelling again. So now let's look at this visually. Here is the new visual representation. So now we have our big ideas, we have our curricular competencies, and look at our content. Content is still there. It is still there. But if you look at this visually, you'll see it is no longer an 80-20. It's like 25-75, maybe 30-70, okay? And so when we're planning our units, we want to kind of keep these visuals in mind, because if we have a unit that's just all content goals, that's not really representative of this new kind of shift in the curriculum, because the curriculum didn't just get updated. It got, like, the entire thing got renewed. And when you're renewing an entire curriculum, that's not an update. That's a paradigm shift, okay? And so as much as we are still using content, the emphasis is on competencies. So I'm not a quantitative person, ask Leighton, but a really nice guiding principle to think when you're planning is, do I have more competencies than content goals? Right? It's a good, because then we're like, we can use content to teach competencies. We're not doing the other. We're not using competencies to teach content. Like, we're really need to, and content has been removed to make room for these competencies. So remember when I said curriculum used to be like a book? We cannot think of the new curriculum this way, okay? And so I'm trying to think, like, how can we think of the new curriculum? You know, like, I love my metaphors, and I'm just like, okay, like, how do we read this curriculum? Like, the biggest question I've had from people is just like, this curriculum has so much, I can't cover it all. And I'm like, no, we're thinking like we still have to read it like a book, like a binder. And so then I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, what can we think about how we read this curriculum? And then I was in Toys R Us one day and I found this. Are you ready? Boom! A flip book. I need to get my hands on one of these, okay? Now think about this. If you go, you know these flip books, right? The pages flip and you can make different things. Okay, I want you to think about this. Let me check my time. Okay. This flip book, let's say this one, The Miserable Two-Toed Lizard. This particular book is the same in every single store. Every single store, the book is the same, okay? But if I pick up the book and Leighton picks up the book, we're going to read it in 2 totally different ways because we're 2 different readers. The book is responsive to us, okay? The book is the same, for both of us, but it's responsive to us because we are different. So I might flip the pages to say a miserable two-toed lizard, but Layton flips the pages for it to say a happy three-toed panda bear. It's the same book, but it's not read the same way. This, my friends, is the difference between standardized curriculum, which is the same for everyone and read the same way, and standards-based curriculum where the book is the same, but it's read in response to the reader. So our curriculum, we draw from the same curriculum. All the Math 8 teachers are drawing from the same curriculum, but how we read it depends on our kids. It depends on our classrooms. So then I'm thinking to myself, we need to build a flip book. We need to build a curricular flip book. And then I couldn't sleep. You ready for this? This is our curricular flip book. Okay, take a look. The big idea is the head. It guides us. So we're going to be flipping. You know how there's 4 options of big ideas? You can flip which one works for you, right? Which big idea am I going to use in my unit? But we're not evaluating those big ideas. Those are just, they're guiding us, right? They're guiding us. It's our inquiry. It's what's getting us interested. What we are evaluating are the 2 pages in the middle, the core, the body of the flip book. So we have content goals and we have curricular competency goals. This is what we're evaluating. Your content can be a scope and sequence. Like you can work on those through the year, but the responsivity comes in one teacher can be teaching fractions and another teacher can be teaching fractions, but the competencies that they're drawing on can be reflective of the student's needs. And so Layton talked about performance-based assessments, right? We've been doing this in literacy for a long time, but what if we also said, okay, let's do these performance-based assessments in all areas to figure out what competencies our kids need, so that yes, we are looking at fractions, but what competencies do we need to develop as our community using this content? We're not expected to cover all of the competencies. We're going to cover the headers. Do you know what I mean? Like the headers on the top, like so in math, there's 4, right? We want to hit all of those, but the specific competencies, I kind of think of them like objectives, like which competencies are going to work for my particular kids. So it's like a flip book. Okay, ready for the foundation? Our feet. Our feet are the core competence. This is what we stand on. This is who we need to be able to walk this journey. We don't evaluate these. The students evaluate these because you can't evaluate someone's joy. However, we still need to teach it. Layton mentioned this before. We need to model competency. We need to live competencies. We need to show them over time what it means to commit to and target and learn about and reflect on and find evidence of. And so these core competencies, I've seen such beautiful examples of like communities choosing one together as we can statements. I've seen communities choose one competency and then students have individual goals. But what students are choosing, we're teaching, right? We can't just reflect on them. I think my favorite one was what I did. I worked with a 4th grade class and I put up on the board and I'm like, okay, everyone, talk to your neighbor about, you know, when you persevered today. And like one of the little guys in the back is like, why do you want us to talk about being perverts? And I'm like, whoa, okay, hold on, we need to have a conversation about persevering, right? Like we still have to teach these things, right? We can't just, you know, just because we're not evaluating. So K-12, how do we pull these in? And so part of that competency-based IEP process is, what if those core competencies we work through kids like individually to figure out, well, what goals are going to help them, as opposed to focusing on those deficit areas. And so the last thing I'm going to show you here are some examples. Okay, so this flip book aligns to this planning document. I think of this as the airplane. Okay, you have your big idea and opportunity to turn that big idea in some guiding questions. You'll also see in this visual, there's more curricular competencies than content, right? This is what we're keeping in mind. So that's how it's represented in the template, but you can play with this all you want, all right? What content are we using? What competencies are we developing with that content? And what's the core competency that the kids have a role in deciding that we're using as our foundation? So I have a couple of examples in here. Some include core competencies, some were on a different page, but this one was a grade 8 English class. And this was about, they were really developing their oral language. And so grade 8 English, A.D. Rundle, Chilliwack, shout out to Chilliwack. So the question was, how can I be an active citizen? How can I use oral language to be an active citizen and contribute to my community? The content goals, I know oral language features and strategies. I know elements of visual and graphic text. And then the competencies that were chosen because of this particular group: meaningful connections, synthesizing ideas from a variety of sources, using writing and design processes, right? And assessing and refining oral texts. So this was now their unit plan. And so the next step was, okay, now let's go in. Yeah, Rundle Rams was to go in and be like, okay, now let's draw out our lesson sequence. This one, though, I love. This is Social Studies 9 class. And what I love about this one is they actually went through and created student-friendly language. So this is a good one. This is when Cecil Green was a really big issue in Vancouver, the monument. What are the traces of exploration, expansion, and our colonization in our community and the world? What artifacts remain and or are being created to honor the past, present, and future in ethical ways? Okay, so our content goals. This is one goal spread out, so don't freak out. I know exploration, expansion, colonization, and I know how they're connected. The 3 competency goals are focusing on looking at causes and consequences, looking at different perspectives, looking at ethical judgments. The bolded words are becoming our vocabulary. So this is what we showed the kids. This became their final project. It's not as fancy as Layton's. I feel like I need some graphics, but we're starting with what can we learn from artifacts? We have our big questions. We have our vocabulary. We have the goals. And now we're talking about, okay, kids, here we go. This is what's going to be really exciting. So this was now our quest with kids to say, we're going to look at different artifacts. You're going to choose an artifact that was created and celebrated in the name of exploration, expansion, or colonization. Here are some possible prompts. And the prompts are directly connected to goals so that the kids know that these responses are evidence for this goal. Why was this artifact created? What was it celebrating? What do you think the response to this artifact could have been at the time, right? The nice thing about this, though, is that those goals actually became the 1-point rubric that kids use to self-assess. So we have our big question, we have our goals. These are things I need to do. Where do I need support? Where do I need some challenge? I didn't even get to my second strategy today, but I'm going to show you what the next step was we actually showed them the learning continuums that students used to look at their evidence and self-assess, and also for us to evaluate based on all of the evidence for that unit. And so the top is the content goal. I know exploration, expansion, and colonization. And we actually described what each of these progressions were that aren't deficit based. So everybody started with approaching. Everybody did. I know a time or a place that I have explored, and I know some explorers in history. That's where we started for everybody. It was the access point. It's where we started. It was the background knowledge, adding on complexity. So rather than looking at rubrics as, looking at this as backwards means that you are having a deficit, this is really about where can we all start together, and then we choose the level of complexity that we're expressing our learning in. Any type of evidence counted. It didn't just have to be this, like they were developing a newspaper was the summative task, but that was one piece of evidence for the entire unit that kids were collecting and organizing. And then they could look at how they could go deeper into their learning as opposed to just completing a task or an activity. Julie has a good question. Are the kids co-authoring this? So in this particular example, we chose goals based on the performance-based assessment that the class had taken. In this one, we're modeling inquiry. Okay, so in the following unit, what we did is we actually gave them the big idea. So on here, we gave them the big idea and we found the important words, and then kids came up with those inquiry questions themselves. And so this modeled the process, but in following units, absolutely, kids could come up with these questions. There was one class where we gave them the curricular goals and they came up with student-friendly goals in ways that they could understand, and they highlighted the words. And so this one was very, very much modeling that process, but this could very, very easily be a way where kids could have a role in the development of the actual goals themselves. So my friends, I didn't even get to the second example. Oh man. Okay, we're just gonna have to come back together.
We'll have you back, Shelly.
So I'm hoping that there was something in there that was useful, something that you can connect to. But my time is up, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. Whew, I'm hot from yelling.
Friends, just as we're putting up the final slide, can in the chat box you show some appreciation by sharing something specific that resonated with you today. The greatest compliment is actually taking something shared and sharing it back. Something that resonated. In groups you can write. Laura, you can type for your staff. To loan, same thing for you. Tammy, do I have the correct display?
Yeah, because you don't have a next one, but could you just flip it to the flip screen one? Perfect.
First of all, thank you to ST61 for organizing and hosting and registering and filming and then editing and then posting our webinars on their website. An email will come out when the edited video is available, as well as the slides. And in my case, the example handout from Kim Ondrick and Danica Hardy. Those will all be on the ST61 website. But if you register for the series, which that's why you're here, you'll get an email saying it's ready and here's the stuff. Shelley Moore, we are just so delighted to have had you here. And I'm so delighted that you were such a rambunctious learner in grade 8 and grade 9, because would we have stayed connected? I don't know. I'm thinking that was 29 years ago I taught you though.
I'm not even 29, so I don't even know how you're even coming to that number.
Friends, as you head towards these finishing off the December part of teaching, and we are in such uncertain times, we just want you to know that we hold you in care and in community, that we are not only stronger together, but we're doing really important work. And by going deep and focusing on important things and building our kids' competencies, we empower them to be well in this world and to engage in this world in critical and creative ways. So thank you for all that you do. I can't believe we're even doing this in our lives right now, but that's what we do as educators, right? We build spaces for kids to be successful. Shelley, thank you for modeling what this looks like, for taking us deeper, and also thanks for not sharing everything, but just choosing a few things to go deeply with, because we can take that away with us. Mm-hmm. We hope that you'll join us for seminar 3 with guest John Harris, where we'll be taking up place-conscious learning, including land-based pedagogy. And that will be Wednesday, February 17th. And then our final webinar of the year will be, well, unless we add one more to get Shelley back, will be around social, emotional, and self-regulated learning. Thank you all for being your amazing selves. We love you in a professional way. Take good care of yourselves.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.